Final Fantasy XVI is a great game, and actually it's the best game that I played in 2023. Although I really didn't have a ton of time to play games in 2023, so that's not really saying too much, but I've been seeing a lot of Final Fantasy XVI slander recently, especially with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's release, and I felt like I needed to somehow defend this game a little bit. Also, coming from someone who forced their wife to play through the Kingdom Hearts series, I usually have no one to talk to with games like this since all my friends exclusively play Madden, MLB The Show, 2K, and other non-story based games, so this will be my attempt to show them what they're missing out on, and also just to get my thoughts out to the void and connect with others who might have similar opinions and interests to me. I meant for this video to come out like a year ago when Final Fantasy XVI actually came out, but I'm really good at procrastinating and doubting that this video would turn out right, so hopefully it doesn't suck. So my determination on whether any modern game is good or not can be boiled down to 5 different scoring categories. These are the story, the characters and voice acting, gameplay, graphics, and music. We'll start with the story and plot of Final Fantasy XVI. At this point, you should already know that there will be some major spoilers in this video, but here's your spoiler warning. I'm going to try to give a summary of basically the entire main game story in less than 10 minutes, but I won't be going into any detail about the DLC. Save this to your watch later playlist if you haven't experienced this game yet but are planning on it. If you already know what happens or don't care, then check the description for a timestamp to skip the story summary. Our story takes place in the fictional set of twin continents called Valistea, which is divided into 6 different kingdoms. Aether, or magic, is rampant in the world, as can be seen from the gigantic magic mother crystals that the kingdoms have control over. There are even some humans who have control over the Aether called bearers. They are basically watered-down versions of the elemental bearers in Avatar, and are enslaved in this world and marked with a sick face tattoo. There are also much stronger magic wielders called dominants, who embody one of the Eikons or gods in this world. The 6 kingdoms often use these dominants to keep and in some cases extend their power throughout the region. Tensions between the nations are high as the blight or a magical drought is consuming all organic life in the land. Our protagonist of the story is Clive Rosfield, who is the firstborn son of the nation of Rosaria's ruling family, Elwyn and Annabella Rosfield. His mom is a total bitch and hates him because he was not chosen as the dominant of the Phoenix. Instead, his brother Joshua was bestowed this power. Like a good little protagonist, Clive doesn't hold any hard feelings over Joshua and actually becomes his shield or protector. As his shield, Joshua grants him some of his fire powers that come with being the dominant of the Phoenix. That night, things quickly turn south as Joshua awakens to screaming and the sounds of swords clashing. The Sambreki Empire has pulled a surprise, unprompted attack on Rosaria. Joshua fights through some soldiers and recoups with Clive and their dad as they head to the rear gate to try to escape the city. Unfortunately, the entire city is surrounded and they have no choice but to fight Sambreki's elite soldiers. Duke Elwyn gets one shot, which triggers Joshua's desperation move, awakening the Phoenix to avenge his father's death. Clive watches on in horror when the seemingly impossible happens, as another icon of fire appears. The 2 icons duke it out, but the inexperienced Phoenix is no match for the devil, and Joshua's flame is snuffed out. It is revealed that Annabella was the orchestrator of this mutiny, as she craved more power and defected to the Sambreki Empire. Clive is taken prisoner by the army and swears his revenge. Our happy story resumes 13 years later, as Clive is sent on a mission for the Sambreki army behind enemy lines during a fight between the Dhalmekian Republic and the Iron Kingdom, to assassinate the Iron Kingdom's dominant. After a fight between the Dhalmekian Republic's dominant, Titan, and the Iron Kingdom's dominant, Shiva, Clive intercepts the retreating dominant of Shiva to assassinate her. It is here that we find out that the dominant of Shiva is Clive's childhood friend and love interest, Jill Warwick. Clive obviously refuses to assassinate her and deserts to free her. Him and Jill are rescued from their enemies by Zeus or something, and they successfully make their escape to a hideaway. It is later revealed that Zeus is actually Sid, which is short for the ugliest name I've ever heard, Sidolphus. Sid is actually the Abraham Lincoln of this world and aims to free the bearers of the world from their enslavement. Sid vows to help Clive find his brother's killer, not entirely for Clive's sake, but for the sake of Valistea, as having a rogue icon roaming about can't be a good thing. Clive, his childhood wolf dog Torgal, Sid and a tracker named Gav track the unknown dominant to a fortress in southwestern Zambrecki. It turns out that this dominant of fire has actually been captured by Benedicta, who is a servant of the kingdom of Waloed and dominant of the Eikon of wind, Garuda. We find out that there is some beef between Benedicta and Sid is briefly incapacitated by Benedicta. Clive and Torgal continue their way through the fortress to confront her. Benedicta puts up a good fight, but Clive and Torgal put on an absolute clinic and destroy a bewildered Benedicta. Clive goes in to interrogate Benedicta, however, as he touches her, his most powerful hidden ability is revealed as he slurps
nice
Garuda's powers right out of her. During this moment, Benedicta is able to flee, however she starts to spiral and goes into full-blown panic since she is not able to feel Garuda for the first time in her life. Her and her followers are ambushed by some dudes while they are fleeing, and a desperate Benedicta is able to somehow summon Garuda one last time. Clive hears voices calling to him inside the carnage that Garuda is summoned, and ends up fighting Garuda himself. He actually puts on a good fight and seems to get the best of her. However, he lets his guard down and is snatched up by her talons. As Garuda is about to squeeze the final breaths out of him, time completely stops, and it is revealed that Clive himself is the dominant of Ifrit, the very same dominant who killed his brother. Ifrit decimates Garuda, however he doesn't transform back into Clive, as Sid is forced to summon Gandalf, or Ramu, to knock him out and take him back to the hideaway. Sid calms down a very naked and suicidal Clive, and Clive eventually pulls himself together to make himself useful. Gav has continued tracking the mysterious hooded dominant from before, and Clive goes to meet up and find this guy. They aren't able to find him, unfortunately, as they get ambushed by some Imperials and Dragoons from the Empire of Zambrecki. After defeating the enemies, Gav says that the hooded figure is heading towards Clive's stomping ground in Rosaria. In a stunning turn of events, the game shifts focus to the hooded figure and his companion. We actually get to see the hooded figure show his face, and it is revealed that this mysterious rogue figure isn't just any dominant, but the dominant of Phoenix, Joshua Rossfield, who was somehow able to survive the attack of Ifrit 13 years ago. Jill is now awake at the base, and Clive embraces her and explains the situation on how he is the dominant of Ifrit and how he thinks he is the murderer of his brother. Jill suggests that they go back to Phoenix Gate in Rosaria to figure out what really happened that night that Rosaria fell. They eventually catch up to the hooded figure, Joshua, and follow him into a chamber that only a dominant of fire can enter. A bunch of robot dudes immediately jump them as they make their way through the dungeon, and eventually they end up at a mural that looks like a Ifrit with wings, and time stops again as Clive is assaulted with some high-pitched ringing and confronted by a hooded figure. He's teleported to the exact place where Joshua died, and witnesses a reenactment of Ifrit's beatdown. It's here that Clive finally comes to terms that it was him that killed his brother. Clive slays the version of Ifrit and eventually is confronted by his infernal shadow. Probably the most epic fight of the game happens as Clive finally accepts the truth and embraces his powers, gaining the full power of Ifrit. He matches his infernal shadow's Ifrit with his very own and comes to the realization that this beast is not Ifrit, but he himself is. He overpowers this false god and eventually is teleported back to the real world. In the meantime, Hugo Kupka, the dominant of Titan and former lover of Benedicta, finds out that she died and vows for revenge against Sid and his followers. Clive and Jill then head back to the hideout and decide to help Sid in his endeavors to free the world. Sid drops an absolute bombshell on them, revealing that the blight is caused by the mother crystals sucking the life out of the planet, and the only way to stop it is to destroy the crystals. So off they go to destroy the first mother crystal, Drake's head in the Empire of Zambrecki. They sneak right through the kingdom, fight a bunch of magic-crazed zombie dudes, fight a dragon, and eventually get to the crystal. Obviously, it would be way too easy for them to just destroy the crystal, and just as Sid primes his Eikon to destroy it, a portal appears and snipes Sid with some laser beams. Then, a creature that kinda looks like Sam Sulek emerges and Clive fights it as Ifrit. We now know this creature to be Typhon, but he is no match for Ifrit. After the fight, it turns out Sid isn't exactly bulletproof and things aren't really looking great for him. Then ugly butthole eyes looking guy comes out of nowhere to try to become one with Clive Rossfield. Sid, however, says he knows who it is and with his last of his strength stabs him. He then fails to elaborate and unfortunately passes away, letting Clive suck the thunder guide out of him as he enjoys his last smoke. Unfortunately, the ugly guy comes back and shoots blue flame at Clive and Jill, incapacitating them. But Joshua apparently has been there the entire time and finally steps in to save them. He then refers to this being as Ultima, and apparently he's no match for it, so he decides to trap it within himself instead and skedaddles before Clive and Jill can wake up. There's no time to mourn Sid, as Hugo has decided to take his revenge on Sid and attacks the hideout with Titan, while Gav tries to save as many people as he can. 5 years pass and Clive is now the leader of the Resistance and is for some reason going as Sid now. I guess to hide his identity? The Resistance has a new hideaway, which seems like a major upgrade to be honest, so at least they have that going for them. They decide the time is now right to attack the next Mother Crystal in the Iron Kingdom called Drake's Breath. In order to get there, they need a good ship, and Clive decides to make his presence known to his uncle Byron. Byron has a lot of pull politically right now, and of course he is overwhelmed by seeing his thought-to-be-dead nephew, and offers all the help he can from here on out. They then make their way to the volcanic island of Ironholm. Jill was previously enslaved by these people, so this is obviously very emotional for her, and she's out for revenge against the leader. They confront Jill's former abuser, and before they can destroy him and the Mother Crystal, a giant fire dude with curvy long nips comes out to protect it. Clive gets performance anxiety, but luckily Jill is able to prime her Eikon, Shiva, and together they take out the fire beast. Jill enhances Clive's sword with ice magic and he destroys the crystal. Jill also gets her revenge, slaying the religious nut. They head back to the hideout to plan their next move, when they find out that Rosaria is under attack by Hugo's army. Gav, Torgal, Jill, and Clive head to Rosaria to end the threat of Hugo once and for all. They make their way through the siege, fight this jaguar thing with tentacles, and somehow Hugo is able to sneak behind them and capture Jill. Left with no other choice, Clive surrenders and is locked away. Gav is able to break in and rescue Clive, and they head to stop the assassination of Jill in the courtyard. Right as they are about to assassinate Jill Skyrim style, Torgal comes to the rescue, transforming into his Frost Wolf final form. With Jill saved, Clive heads into the castle where he finds Hugo sitting in front of the throne, which he promptly destroys with one punch. Then Hugo goes apeshit and we finally get to fight him. It's a fairly even fight, but Hugo eventually gets the upper hand. However, he then loses hand privileges. Before Clive can finish him off, he prematurely sucks the rocks out of him. Hugo goes into a rage, which starts to bring some of the castle down, and some mysterious man comes to take him away. They once again head back to the base to recoup. Clive lets Jill rest up a bit, and him and Uncle Byron go out to find and finish Hugo once and for all at Drake's Fang in the deserts of the Dhalmekian Republic. They actually end up at the same bar/hotel as Joshua. Joshua is starting to weaken from holding Ultima inside of him and is coughing up blood. While this is happening, Clive and Byron get into a bar fight and Joshua slips away. After this, they make for Drake's Fang where Hugo is hiding. Clive fights his way through some orcs, fights the Undertaker. No, not that Undertaker. And eventually stumbles upon Hugo in front of another Mother Crystal. Hugo has a vision of a naked Benedicta, but gets cucked by Clive in his own fantasy. This prompts Hugo to go berserk and summon Titan, as Clive summons Ifrit to even the playing field. Ifrit and Clive are actually getting the best of Hugo and Titan, however Titan decides to take some performance enhancing crystals and transforms into an insanely cool looking Titan called Titan Lost. Ifrit charges ahead and takes on the Dorito-shaped Titan, scaling his rock-hard tentacles. Ifrit is faster than Titan in his giant form and causes him to hit himself multiple times with his rock tentacles, eventually cutting his arms off with a giant fireball. He then redirects one final tentacle to destroy this final form, transforming him back into regular Titan. Ifrit decides he wants to take part in some PEDs as well and gets rock hard. They go blow for blow and are seemingly an even match until Ifrit gets the upper hand and deals the final blow, defeating Hugo and Titan once and for all. After the fight, Ifrit has the opportunity to destroy another Mother Crystal, shattering Drake's Fang with a slice of his Fireblade arm. The scene now shifts to a base camp where Dion, the crown prince of the Sambreki Empire, leader of the Holy Order of the Knights Dragoon and dominant of Bahamut, is preparing for his next battle. He's been in intense fights with the king of Waloed, Barnabas Tharmir, who is the dominant of Odin. Joshua ends up infiltrating this camp to force a meeting with Dion, asking for his help in the inevitable upcoming battle with Ultima. The scene shifts to the imperial court of Sanbreque, where Dion is confronting his father, who has just recently given the power and title to emperor to his youngest son Olivier, even though he's just a boy. It seems that there is some major manipulation going on behind the scenes here that the former emperor is blind to. Dion is rightfully upset that he was passed over, as his former empire shares his vision of the Sanbreque, ruling over all of Valistea now that Titan is gone. We shift back to the conversation between Joshua and Dion. Dion is suspecting that a sinister force, such as Ultima, may be corrupting and exerting influence on Sanbreque. Dion finally answers Joshua's request for aid with a "maybe later," as he has his own affairs to attend to back home. He alludes to Ultima and Annabella's influence on the throne, and states that once he deals with this, the strength he has will be Joshua's. The gang has made its way to Sanbreque to attempt to destroy another Mother Crystal. It's apparent something has gone awry with Dion's plan to take back control of the throne. This is evident to Bahamut violating multiple codes of the Geneva Convention and bombarding his own nation with missiles of light. Clive and the gang make a dash for the castle in an attempt to end Bahamut's rampage. Joshua is also in the city and starts to take on Bahamut with the Phoenix. This is the first time that Clive has seen Joshua / the Phoenix while fully conscious. Clive and the gang fight their way to the castle and encounter the she-devil herself, Annabella Rossfield, who also is with Olivier. Jill stands on business, and Annabella explains why she betrayed her country. Basically, just wanted power and to get a son of the noblest blood, and she had nothing with Clive, who hadn't awoken, and Joshua, who she thought was weak. Clive goes off on her.
Joshua's every waking moment was spent trying to shoulder the burden that you and the Phoenix and the Duchy foisted on him. That's why I became his shield. To help bear the weight. But what did you do? You betrayed your own blood and surrendered your son to his fate!
And the Phoenix and Joshua come crashing down into the castle. Clive fulfills his duty as Joshua's shield and transforms into Ifrit to take on Bahamut as his wall of fire intercepts Bahamut's beams of light. Now I'll give a play-by-play of one of the best fights in the game. Bahamut unleashes Mega Flare at Ifrit as he scales the giant crystal and dodges the flares, striking Bahamut with a ball of fire. Bahamut surprises Ifrit through the smoke, grabs him in his claws and bashes him around a little bit, dragging his face across the crystal. He then starts to absorb energy from the crystal, becoming even more powerful. Ifrit by himself is no match for Bahamut, but luckily the Phoenix is back in the fight and intercepts Bahamut's assault. But Bahamut attacks Ifrit with a Giga Flare anyways. That leaves the Phoenix alone to stall while Ifrit gets his strength back. The Phoenix does his best and keeps Bahamut occupied, and before he can unleash another Giga Flare, Ifrit strikes Bahamut. It will take much more than a punch to destroy Bahamut though, but at last Ifrit and Phoenix are fighting side by side. Ifrit and the Phoenix now have the upper hand and are dealing good damage to Bahamut. However, Bahamut takes a page out of Titan's playbook and absorbs the entire Mother Crystal. Joshua and Clive have a trick up their sleeve though, and combine together to form a winged Ifrit called Ifrit Risen. Together they take off into the stratosphere to clash with Bahamut one last time. It finally seems like the playing field is even, and Joshua and Clive have the upper hand. In one last desperate attempt, Bahamut transforms into his final form and does his best Donald Duck impersonation and charges up a Zeta Flare. This attack would be apocalyptic to the planet, and Joshua and Clive have no choice but to take it straight on. With their combined power, they push through the attack, ending Bahamut's rampage once and for all. Bahamut transforms back into Dion, and Phoenix swoops in to save him while Clive destroys the Mother Crystal. As Joshua and Clive have a touching reunion back on the ground, Dion awakens. Dion doesn't see his brother hiding behind Annabella. He sees what he's been pulling the strings the entire time: Ultima. Dion yeets his lance at Ultima, making him disappear for now. Joshua decides that Dion is worth saving, and as Clive helps to pick him up, he slurps the Bahamut powers out of Dion, revealing Dion's memories and what caused his rampage. Dion's plan to take back the throne from his brother was going rather smoothly, and he took control of the throne room with little bloodshed. Dion tries to talk sense into his father to no avail. He threatens to kill his brother and end the dark force pulling all the strings. Olivier, or Ultima, talks to Dion now, telling Dion to claim Valistea for me, brother. This pushes Dion over the edge, and he throws his lance at Olivier. But the lance never reaches his target as his father steps in front of it. A blood-soaked Olivier/Ultima is unfazed and said that this was his plan all along. He calls him a kinslayer, which pushed Dion over the edge and started the rampage. We go back to the real world now, and Annabella is hysterical, with her new son dead and seeing the ghosts of her past. Her story finally comes to an end as she slits her own throat. Ultima appears over the city as all of his plans start to come to fruition. With all but one Mother Crystal left, the skies have turned red, giving the world an apocalyptic look. Without the Mother Crystals to help Aether floods have become rampant, causing destruction throughout the lands. They make their way to the city of Canver, where the Akashic threaten to overtake the city. It is here that they encounter the King of Waloed, Dominant of Odin, and the protector of the final Mother Crystal, Barnabas. Clive defeats Barnabas's commander, Sleipnir, who we saw save Hugo earlier, but then Clive seems to forget everything he knows about fighting and gets sliced up by Barnabas, causing them to retreat with a distraction by Jill and Shiva, who end up getting left behind. Clive and company board the fastest ship in the world not named the Black Pearl, which was created by Sid's adopted genius daughter, Mid, and chase down Barnabas' ship where Jill is hostage. Barnabas shows just how OP he is, but they dodge his attack and eventually ram Barnabas' ship. Clive boards and finds Jill while Joshua holds up Barnabas. Barnabas summons his flying horse and creates the opposite of the Grand Canyon. His ship then turns into the Titanic with Clive and Jill on board. He destroys Clive again and explains he wants the entire world to turn Akashic because that's what Ultima wants. He says peace and the water starts coming down, but Jill is able to create a path out with her ice powers. They make it out and wait for rescue on a nearby island. They are both super naked at this point while their clothes dry, and in an intimate scene, Jill gives Clive's consent to take her ice Eikon powers, and probably other things. They eventually get picked up and head back to the hideaway. Clive, Joshua, and Gav eventually make landfall in the Kingdom of Waloed to confront Barnabas again and try to destroy the last Mother Crystal. Joshua punches Clive for being what he thought was selfish in taking Jill's Eikon and not letting others help, claiming the world is ours to save, not just his. Joshua ends up looking for information in an abandoned castle, while Clive and Gav scout ahead. He finds the same prophecy mural thing from Phoenix Gate, then the Ultima in his chest gives him really bad heartburn. Gav and Clive get separated from Joshua when Odin jump scares them and cuts them off from Joshua. Barnabas believes that serving his god will allow him to share in Ultima's new world that he plans to make. He also states that God chose Clive to be his vessel and looks to prove his worth to Ultima by defeating Clive. The battle is fierce and both Clive and Barnabas end up priming their icons. Barnabas/Odin looks to deal the final strike with a giant sword of darkness, but Afri is able to hold on and tear the sword in half, unleashing the most disrespectful Xantasuken on a bewildered Odin with his own sword. The battle then shifts to man-to-man combat, and after slow-mo dodging Barnabas' sword, Clive deals a finishing blow on Barnabas. Before he can truly die, though, he grabs Clive's leg, transferring his Icon of Darkness to Clive, fulfilling his task of preparing God's vessel. Joshua and Clive march forward to confront Ultima, fighting Akashic and even a behemoth along the way. They reach the castle, but become overwhelmed by an army of Akashic. Just in the nick of time, Min crashes their ship through the wall, and Dion, Jill, and Gav hold off the army of Akashic as Clive and Joshua go through the gates, where Ultima has been waiting for them. Ultima sends them to the Shadow Realm and explains that his kind existed long before mankind. They were the ones that found magic, however they also encountered the Blight. They were so powerless against it, so they cast their physical bodies away, and eventually found Valistea. It is here that we learn the true purpose of the Mother Crystals, as a way to harvest large amounts of Aether. They also created humanity to find a suitable host to channel the Aether into, to cast a spell to revive Ultima's people. However, humanity developed free will, which Ultima believes is the greatest sin of all. He then attempts to weaken Clive mentally and physically before sending them both back to the real world, where they destroy the last Mother Crystal. Ultima then summons his ship that they traveled to Valistea and Origin, and illegally parks it ominously in the sky. It is decided that Dion, Clive, and Joshua will be the trio to fly to the sky base and take on Ultima, all three knowing that this may be a one-way trip. Clive promises to come back to Jill, and the three take off on the back of Bahamut. Bahamut blasts a hole into the side of Origin where they find Ultima waiting for them. Joshua and Clive also prime their icons, and Bahamut, the Phoenix, and Ifrit battle against Ultima, who transforms into a dark-winged Ifrit. The true power of Ultima is immediately seen, as he easily deflects the most powerful of their attacks and eventually downs Ifrit. The Phoenix goes to save Clive as Ultima primes to the finishing blow. It is here that Dion/Bahamut makes their heroic last stand to defend Clive and Joshua, intercepting Ultima's fireball of death with a beam of pure light, Harry Potter style, asking not for acceptance, only forgiveness. Just as Ultima's attack seems to overwhelm Bahamut, he is able to unleash a barrage of heat-seeking energy missiles, directly impacting a surprise Ultima. Dion falls to his death, satisfied that he was able to atone for the sins he committed. Joshua finds Clive and is able to heal him up. However, he himself could use some healing. They head towards the core and the final clash with Ultima. Ultima raises his kin from their slumber, which results in the most heartbreaking scene of the game. Remember, Joshua sealed one of Ultima's kin within himself earlier in the game. As he summons his brethren, Ultima frees himself from Joshua's chest. This is too much for Joshua's body to bear, and with his dying breath, he transfers his Eikon powers to Clive, thanking him for being his brother. As Clive grieves his brother's death, Ultima merges with his brothers. A heartbroken but defiant Clive is the only person that stands in Ultima's way, as he swears to shield the Firebird's flame forevermore. And thus, the final fight takes place between Ultima and his chosen vessel. This is by far my favorite fight in the game, and it starts off with Ultima and Clive fighting as they are, with Ultima eventually turning into his Ifrit/Phoenix form. Clive then matches his form and comes out on top before Ultima can unlock Purgatorium. Ultima then transforms into his final form, Ultimalius, vowing an eternity of anguish for Clive. With callbacks to his friends and family that have helped him to get to this very moment, Clive goes blow for blow, icon for icon, against Ultimalius, staggering him with the help of the flames of the Phoenix. In one final clash, Clive charges his sword with fire, throwing it towards Ultimalius' attack, piercing through his chest and declaring the battle finished with one final punch. Clive absorbs what is left of Ultima, and with the battle won, he returns to Joshua's body, attempting to revive him with his newfound power. From here, he uses his power to set things right, by destroying Ultima's legacy of bearers, dominance, crystals, and magic altogether. Clive was able to make it off Origin and is now laying in the sand on the beach. His act of undoing all of Ultima's work seems to have taken all of his power, as he starts turning to stone. In his final moments on Earth, our hero stares up at the night sky, breaking his promise of returning to Jill. A post-credit scene shows us a world far after the events that just occurred. The scene shows two boys who just happen to look similar to Clive and Joshua. One of the boys attempts to start a fire for his mom, wishing that he had the flames of an icon to help. His mother states that magic belongs in fairy tales, confirming that Clive did in fact remove magic from the world. As the boy goes to play with his brother and their dog named Bahamut, the camera pans to a book on the table titled Final Fantasy, written by Joshua Rossfield. I was very pleasantly surprised by this game. I for sure was not expecting a game with such dark themes and heavy tones of religion and slavery. The game does slow down a little bit in the middle with some repetitive side quests, but the combat is just so fun that I don't really care. I do feel like people don't give Final Fantasy games a fair shot due to the fact that there are so many of them out there, and it's just very frustrating. It's kind of like the Fast and Furious movies, except a lot more of the Final Fantasy games are actually good in my opinion. The Final Fantasy XVI is truly one of the top 10 games I've ever played. I think it should have at least been nominated for Game of the Year in 2023. I also like how the ending is kind of open-ended, although I'm definitely just coping. I like to believe that Clive did revive and save Joshua, and I'm just going to believe that Clive also survived, even though there's nothing really saying it, other than the fact that he promised Jill, and you can't break promises. Earlier, I said my criteria for determining if a game is good or not consisted of music, story, gameplay, characters and voice acting, and graphics. I already went into the story and how good I thought it was, so I'll go into music next. Music is one of the most important parts of a game in my opinion. I listen to music every single day, and a lot of my daily music rotation is from video game soundtracks, like Kingdom Hearts, Skyrim, and Final Fantasy. In order for a game to have good music, I think you have to have some calming, soothing tracks that may play while you're exploring the world, and that you may have on in the background for your daily life, as well as soundtracks that'll motivate and pump you up for like a good workout or something. Forevermore is the track that plays as Clive and Jill first head back to Rosaria after reuniting. I remember seeing the beautiful green grass and the lush scenery at 3 reeds with this song in the background and putting my controller down to just take it all in. I can't exactly remember when we first heard Histoire, but it's very similar to Forevermore, just so peaceful, light, and calm. I now listen to the extended versions of these whenever I need to get some serious work done or need to just be calm. Find the Flames is the exact opposite of these tracks. This song makes me feel like I could run through the nearest brick wall and suplex Brock Lesnar or Hugo Kupka myself. When this song first played during the Clive Awakening scene, I was immediately locked in. You can even ask my wife, who was sitting in the same room, who asked if I was okay at the time. Now these 3 songs are obviously not the only good songs in the game. Masayoshi Soken was cooking when he whipped up the soundtrack. Just listen to these bangers and enjoy my live reactions to hearing them. One thing that I think Final Fantasy XVI does well is make you care about the characters. We'll start with the protagonist, Clive. As a straight married man, I'll do my best to not simp, but damn! Let me go into why Clive is the ideal man that every guy should aim to be like. Apart from being handsome and ripped, Clive is also very sensitive and a loving character, who will do anything for his friends and family. He's the model for what masculinity should look like. He's also got that brooding look down real good. Clive has an underdog story that anyone can root for. Although he was born into royalty, his mother despises him for not being the dominant of the Phoenix, and he is in his brother's shadow for most of his entire childhood. Instead of being bitter or jealous, he pledges his life to protecting his brother and his family, and eventually the world. It's also not every day that the protagonist is a wielder of fire. Usually fire is something that an antagonist might wield due to his destructive tendencies, so that was pretty cool to see. I have to mention just how good Clive's voice actor, Ben Starr, did in voicing Clive, especially during the final stretch. When Joshua died the second time, his voice acting had me sobbing. Also, prior to the game, my favorite yell/scream in a video game, I know it's a weird category to have, was Terra from Birth by Sleep. But I think Clive's primal yell in the final battle takes the cake. Ben probably won't hear this, but shout out to Ben. Amazing job. Joshua shares a lot of the same characteristics as Clive, and he is immediately established as an extremely likable character. To be honest, I had little information about this game before playing it, and he just looked like he was going to be an annoying brat little brother, but it turns out he's quite the opposite. He possesses the same selflessness as Clive, and although he is also royalty, he will not let his subjects, friends, or family take on any harm that should befall them, even if that's part of their job. You even see him decline his attendant's assistance multiple times with certain things, as he doesn't want to be her burden, even though that's literally her job as a Knight of the Undying. He even traps Ultima in his own body in an attempt to shield Clive from harm. Neither Clive nor Joshua really behave like typical royalty would, and if possible would rather shield others from pain and turmoil. It's just really refreshing to see princes not be stuck-up brats as they are in a lot of games, movies, and TV shows, and probably real life. Also, the brotherly bond that Clive and Joshua have is just so wholesome. They care about each other so much, but also aren't afraid to let each other know when they're being stupid. The scene at the end showing how they were bonded from Joshua's birth until the very end left me sobbing, and leaves you with a sort of longing to have that strong brotherly bond with someone. The only annoying thing about Clive and Joshua is they do way too much by themselves without getting others' input or help, which, results in their death. Next, let's talk about Jill. Jill's a controversial character from what I've seen, with some saying she's way too bland. But I do kinda like how they developed Jill in this game, as she is not there to be just a love interest to Clive. She has her own tragic backstory full of slavery, turmoil, and isn't totally useless, as she possesses the power of Shiva and is great with a sword. I think people are used to main love interest being a bit more lively, I guess. But I mean, she just went through so much and had to do unspeakable things. I wouldn't expect her to be super cheerful and exuberant, like someone, for example, like Yuffie from Final Fantasy VII. I think she's a great other half to Clive. She's just a girl who is trying to atone for the things the Iron Kingdom made her do, and is just trying to survive. She's kind, smart, and the perfect ice to Clive's fire. I'm not saying there aren't valid criticisms toward her character though, and I definitely think they could have developed her a bit better and given her some more important lines. But also, I do have to say that one of the most well-known characters from Final Fantasy, Cloud, also has a similar quiet personality himself, and he's a fan favorite. Although he is a protagonist, so he gets a lot more screen time and emphasis. Dion is just so cool. To be the dominant of Bahamut, probably the most powerful icon in the game, you kind of have to act the part, and he does just that. I don't know what about him is cool, but he just exudes confidence and he has a great redemption arc. He starts by accidentally killing his dad due to Ultima's schemes, goes berserk, then pulls himself together through sheer will and is able to summon Bahamut even after Clive took his powers. He plays a gigantic role in the final fight by breaking into Ultima's ship and sacrificing himself to help Clive and Joshua. Even though he ends up getting overpowered by literally God himself, he probably played a big part in weakening Ultima by forcing him to exert so much energy and hitting him with that barrage of light. The game also does a really good job of making you hate the villains of the game, but also kind of feel for them. Let's start with Satan herself, Annabella Rossfield. This lady is so unlikable. She is an absolute whore who goes from king to king in an attempt to have control over the most powerful kids. She's racist against bearers of magic unless you're a dominant. The despise she has for Clive is just so out of pocket because he had no control over becoming a dominant. She's the whole reason that Clive and Jill spend their entire childhoods in slavery. It's really great that she fumbled the bag and could have ended up with two children who both have control over icons if she was just patient. Instead, she gets a brat-possessed kid and they both end up dying. Benedicta is a character who you first dislike due to her arrogant personality, but then end up pitying. She kinda comes off as one of those stereotypical popular rich kids. She's spoiled with her powers and cruel. However, you can't help but feel a little bad for her after Clive steals her powers and she gets jumped by bandits, all alone for the first time in her life without Garuda. Hugo Kupka is very similar to Benedicta. He was a massive man who looked down upon everyone due to his ability to call upon Titan. If Benedicta was a popular rich girl from school, Hugo Kupka would be considered the captain of the football team. He is a walking Giga Chad, just doing whatever he wants. You do sympathize with him a little bit though, as a man who came from nothing, suddenly thrust into importance and fame due to Titan. He finally gets everything he could ever wish for, but loses the one thing he wants the most, Benedicta. I also couldn't help but pity him when Clive cuts his hands off, rendering him utterly useless. It's just sort of sad to see how pathetic he is without them. So on one hand, you hate him for what he did to the hideout, but on the other, you pity him for being a big pawn in the political game. Now for the main antagonist, Ultima. I actually really liked Ultima. He's kind of like a mysterious figure for most of the game, like Thanos in Marvel, pulling the strings behind the scenes until it's time for his grand entrance and attempt to complete the goals himself. Coming up with Ultima, you have to wonder if the creators got inspirations from the ideologies of Christianity and other religions. In the book of Genesis, the downfall of man from God's grace starts with Adam and Eve becoming self-aware after eating the forbidden fruit. God eventually ends up destroying mankind in a great flood when he wants to start over. In this game, Ultima has his own floods in the form of Aether floods, which transform them into primal Akashic creatures without any will. I don't know, maybe I'm looking into it too much, but finally, I have to say that the Eikon designs are so cool. I think Ifrit's design is so much better than the previous games. Let me know which one you like better, this weird orc-looking thing or this evil-looking beast of Satan. Titan always was pretty cool, but kind of had a basic design, just a giant human-like creature. But his evolved form, Titan Lost, is even better. He kind of reminds me of the sand demon from Naruto, except with earth instead of sand. The sheer size of Titan Lost with his multiple earth pillar tentacles was just cool to see. Although Titan Lost was sick, Bahamut and Odin have to be my favorite designs in this game. Bahamut is my favorite just because I like dragons. You know, he's a giant dragon that shoots laser beams of pure light energy. What more is there to like? Odin is the most menacing of the icons. Giant knight in black armor riding on the back of a flying six-legged stallion with a badass darkness sword. He also has a cool nickname of the Warden of Darkness, which is just so edgy and badass. It was also only fitting to have these two icons facing off against each other for most of the game, pitting light against darkness. The gameplay of Final Fantasy XVI is fast, flashy, and oh so satisfying. Combat with Clive has 3 different types of attacks that you can perform. There's a magic attack, which basically just shoots a ball of elemental energy at the opponent. There's a square attack that attacks the enemy with your sword, allowing you to chain combos together. And there are also special Eikon abilities that have cooldowns that deal the most damage to the enemies. Enemies in this game have stagger bars that act as a sort of shield for them. Once the stagger is broken, enemies are at your mercy as you deal increased damage until it charges back up. It's honestly quite a simple and easy combat system, but it's so satisfying chaining together all the different Eikon abilities. There are a few people who have gotten really good with the combat system and have some insane combos. One person that I'll give a shout out to is True Blade Seeker on YouTube. Give his channel a look after this video. He's made some really entertaining videos on Final Fantasy XVI and Kingdom Hearts 3 by absolutely mastering the fighting systems and making bosses that I still haven't beaten yet in Kingdom Hearts 3 look like child's play on the hardest difficulties. Another aspect of fighting is you are able to control Torgal. You control him with the directional pad and can tell him to attack, heal, or ravage, which launches the enemies into the air. I really didn't want to control him because I just wanted to focus on Clive. But luckily you can equip an item which automatically gives him commands if you'd rather him act on his own, like me. I think the game did a pretty good job with the Eikon fights. With fights between giants, the gameplay can often feel sluggish and slow and kind of boring. Controlling the Eikons didn't feel like that in the game. Using Ifrit was very similar to just controlling a giant Clive. I do wish you could do more combos with Ifrit, but you don't really fight with him that much, so I guess I understand. Also, a lot of the Eikon fights had some insanely cinematic QuickTime events that let you see some really cool moments. I know QuickTime events are controversial, but I think it's necessary in this game to make the Eikon fights more engaging and visually pleasing. The reaction command system in Kingdom Hearts 2 was one of my favorite parts of that game, because it allowed you to do some of the coolest looking things that would be impossible with the base fighting system. It's really the same thing with this game. The QuickTime events allow you to pull off some really insane looking moments. Maybe I'm just a simple man who is easily impressed by flashy visuals that I'm able to trigger, but I really like them. They make the cutscenes far more engaging and let you do some really flashy things that would otherwise be impossible with the combat system. And that doesn't mean that the combat system is bad either. Show me a game where you can do some of these QuickTime event moves with the regular gameplay. I don't think there is one. If you aren't a fan of them, the QuickTime events do become less prominent as the game progresses, and as you gain more abilities. Another thing that I like is how they made this game very accessible to people who might not be the best at video games. In this game, you're able to play either a story-focused mode or an action-based mode. Choosing the story-focused mode automatically equips Clive with the 5 timely accessories, which grant Clive godlike buffs, like letting Clive automatically dodge enemy attacks, or slow down time when the player is about to take a hit. As someone who made my wife play through the entire Kingdom Hearts games and would love to be able to play 3 more games with her, I appreciate games with the option for story-focused gameplay. There are a lot of side quests in this game, and I did them all because I'm a completionist. They are kind of annoying in this game due to their repetitiveness, but there are a good amount of side quests with interesting stories. Jill has an important optional side quest that results in a beautiful moment between her and Clive that really adds to their relationships and develops her a bit more. There are also some great side quests with Quentin of Lostwing, the blacksmith, and Theodore of the Crimson Caravan that pull on the heartstrings. But other than that, they are all kind of repetitive and easy to forget. Now there are some cons in terms of gameplay. One is there really isn't much customization or RPG mechanics in this game, which a lot of people were upset about. Yes, there are different weapons and armor, but they're all extremely easy to acquire. Basically, after each major mission, I would just go to the blacksmith and craft whichever items had the best stats. I rarely ever had to go search for materials and seemed to always have the required materials on me. I didn't really mind this because I didn't want to grind too much. Other than the sword, I really didn't notice any cosmetic changes to Clive when equipping gear. You're able to customize the appearance of your sword, so it doesn't really matter which sword you have equipped, you can just make it look like your favorite sword. I didn't really mind the lack of RPG mechanics because I love hack and slash action games like Kingdom Hearts, and also have a huge backlog of games and a full-time job, so I didn't really have a ton of time to deal with a complicated fighting system. But I understand why some might be disappointed. Finally, I'll go into the graphics of this game. This is an extremely cinematic game. All the Mother Crystals provide a stunning backdrop for a lot of the areas, and the Eikon fights are just full of visual spectacles. They really nailed all the Eikon abilities and particle effects. I enjoyed the fire and light Eikon effects the best. The fight with Bahamut as well as the final fight with Ultima were some of my favorite cinematic moments of the game that really just blew me away graphic wise. The Bahamut fight was over the top in all the right ways with laser beams and fire flying around everywhere. The way they animated the fire and the particle effects in this game is perfect. The final fight with Ultima really shows off how cool all the Eikon abilities are. It was one of my favorite parts of the game when they were going back and forth, head to head, with their Eikon abilities. I will say that there may be a bit tad too much on the screen during the QuickTime events, but I don't think it really takes away from anything. Other than the flashy Eikon visuals, the general graphics are what should be expected from a modern next-gen game. Load times are short, and the texture quality is great. I didn't experience any performance issues or lag at any point in this game, so it seems really well optimized. This has nothing to do with the graphics, but I also really enjoy the world building of the game. It's pretty cool that almost every NPC dialogue seems to evolve as the story progresses. I thought it was great after the last Mother Crystal is destroyed and the vibe of the world transforms into an apocalyptic feel with hints of red tainting the sky. You hear mentions of Hugo's death after it happens, and after the last Mother Crystal turns the sky red, you can really feel the tension in the world with all the NPCs talking about the end of the world. So, in conclusion, I thought this was an amazing game. Yes, there are a lot of valid criticisms of the game that I could go into, but I really just wanted to focus on the good parts because I feel like there are far more good things than bad things about this game. Yes, the story is a bit linear, and yes, there aren't a ton of RPG elements in the game, but I don't always want to have my brain go into overdrive to figure out the mechanics of a boss or master the combat system. I get overwhelmed just looking at someone playing a game like World of Warcraft with their 20 different abilities on their command bar. Yes, a lot of the side quests are repetitive, but you can skip most of them. People have compared this game to Game of Thrones like it's a bad thing, as if Game of Thrones didn't captivate the world and didn't have some of the best writing up until the last couple seasons. But in the end, whether a game is good or bad is a matter of opinion. Just because you don't like a game doesn't make it bad. Your opinion is valid though, because opinions based on how you feel about something can't be wrong. As someone who prioritizes story, action, music, and visuals over complex gameplay most of the time, I thought this was a fantastic game, and it has cemented itself in my top 10 favorite games of all time. If you made it this far, either let me know your thoughts on the game as well as your thoughts on my video. I'm always looking to get better. Also, what games should I play next, and what were your favorite games of 2023 and 2024? Thanks for watching and listening to me rant. I'll catch you later.